Let it be known that you all asked for this. Hello, I will now ramble about Elevation's runner cards for an extended period, and then rate them. I said who I was in the corp video, so let's just talk scale real quick. 5 is a meta-shifting card, it's a strong build-around, potentially best in slot and roll. 4 is solid, with maybe a few notable issues, it's strong though. 3 is a decent role player, or has competitive alternatives, or niche use cases, or some combination of all of those. This is still a card that you will play. 2 is not great. It has clear weaknesses. It's outclassed in its niche, or it's a hard sell. A lot of times this can just be so niche that, yeah, maybe, but probably not. 1 is bad. Please remember there's nuance within these ratings, and that a low rating does not mean a card is not fun. I'm going to beat that drum forever. There are cards that are awful that I adore, and vice versa. And as an additional couple of notes for this video versus the corp one, I play Criminal. I am a dyed-in-the-wool true blue criminal gamer. I have also got a really long-standing anti-anarch bias because they have been top dogs for the majority of Netrunner's life in ways that have been really bad for the game, and I've never really let that go. I wanted to make sure I covered the runner cards after the corp cards because runners exist in the context that corps create. Corps set the terms of engagement, and runners engage in them most of the time. There are more proactive runner decks, but it's important to understand the corp ecosystem that exists and that runners exist within. So with that said, before we talk about Anarch, we have to address the VTuber in the room. This is Hoshiko. You probably know Hoshiko. Hoshiko breaks the scale. There is no NSG runner ID that has caused more cards to die for their sins than Hosh. Every importable dominant archetype is likely best played in Hosh until she's rotated or banned. Now note, that does not mean you aren't going to play other factions. That means that if it can be put into Anarch, whatever it is, there is an argument to be made for playing it in Anarch because Hoshiko is that good at what she does, which is just generate value with basically minimal to no effort. There are cases where Hoshiko does demand you think about when you run and when you don't, but she is so darn effective all the time that it barely matters. If I put Hoshiko on the scale, she would get a 6. She significantly devalues other Anarch IDs by merit of being better than all of them. One day, Hoshiko, you will have to answer for your crimes, and the binder will not be merciful. I am going to put you between my bike spokes. Anyway, let's talk about Ryo. Ryo gets 3 Ashes Rise of the Phoenixborns out of 5. First of all, I can't call Ryo Phoenix. It's the same problem as Ken, right? Like, Express is a cool nickname, but Ken is shorter. Same type deal here. Sorry, Ryo. You're rad as hell, but you're Ryo to me. If you're going to be forced to combo with a card, like an automatic 3x in your ID, Bankar is one of the better ones you could ask for. Banner, not so much. I do like that Banner enables them. I think that's pretty dang cool. I don't necessarily think that that's ideal. It's expensive. It's hard to use. Bankar, though, is just like straight up one of the best Anarch cards, and yeah, we love having a dedicated ID for that. There are a lot more subs that are perfectly okay to let fire than people think. I think this is, again, like my criminal influence is coming through. There's a lot of things that you can just let happen in Netrunner. NSG loves to put, like, kind of mildly punitive subs on things as an additional piece to make a thing worth more credits or whatever, and there's a lot of subs that are just, yeah, whatever, fine. And the moment you get that, you get value from Yo, which is great. 2-inf is nice. We like an extra 2 influence. It would be better in either of the other factions, but we're happy to have it. It's interesting to see a different take on sabotage-type pressure. Like, this isn't Sabo, but it's kind of close, and the fact that it's specifically from hand can situationally make it better. The problem is you don't actually know whether it's better or not. You kind of just aren't up on that. But hand pressure in general is pretty good, and this is pretty good. It's really weird, by the way, that both of the new Anarchs like Buffer Drive. Buffer Drive is going to be talked about more here than I think I've ever talked about Buffer Drive as long as Buffer Drive has been a card. Yeah, I like this ID. Fun. Really interesting. I think you're going to get some neat riffs on like kind of a reg adjacent idea here, as well as some folks that can lean into the gimmick pretty hard. She's neat. Just really neat. Let's talk about Topan. I'm giving Topan 1 titanium rib. I hate giving IDs a 1. I don't think that Netrunner IDs on the whole are deserving of being put straight in the binder very often. The last one that we had that was that bad was Thunderbolt, and that was only true in Standard. In Startup, Thunderbolt was still plenty playable. Topan is a victim, mostly of Hoshiko. This is a crime, and not the cool criminal kind. They are the worst Anarch in Standard, and it's not close. Every other playable Anarch right now is better than Topan. It's sad. Honestly sad. Buffer Drive is their actual console, and it sucks that you have to pay 3 influence to get a console. I know it's not actually a console, but it is load-bearing for Topan because games without Buffer Drive are horrible. Topan's text, as is so disruptive to your game plan that you basically are a completely different deck when you do or don't have Buffer Drive. If you don't find a Buffer Drive, it is horrible playing Topan. I have tried. It is painful. This character struggles all the time. It's thematically kind of cool that you're so scrappy and desperate, but I don't want to be scrappy and desperate against a corp player that knows what they're doing. I want to play Netrunner. In the current NSG card pool, a click for 2 credits with a downside is a pretty weak ability. You get a card and a credit for Lu. You get all sorts of shenanigans in Seb and access to cards that only Seb can reasonably play. Rio can do cool stuff. Hosh is broken. Like, these are IDs that do things, and then there's Topan. I legitimately wonder if Topan and the sort of like is basically a canary in the coal mine for a Hosh ban. Topan is so rough to play right now that I look at that and then I look at the other Anarchs that are available and I wonder, like, if they can Hosh, does Topan's stock go up purely off the back of, well, this is the, like, reg adjacent value ID? It really feels like it. And that's a jarring thing to look at and go like, oh wow, that might be really bad. I will say, though, they're notably kind of neat in Eternal, hence the titanium ribs. There's, like, some really cool stuff you can do. You can play the other cards that activate on trash. You can do some fun stuff with Topan in Eternal. That is a little bit of a snipey thing to end on. I just find Topan to be kind of tragic. Charm Offensive, though, is pretty cool. That gets 3 cat smooches out of 5. If trashing cards is better for corps than it has been prior, which it looks like it is, this keeps them in check. If AUCO becomes a menace, yeah, heck yeah. The res requirement prevents this from being as good as Pinhole. Pinhole is like an elite card that does what it does and not a whole lot else does it. This kind of does it, but it's not game-breaking. It's not really that scary. It's just one of those things where, like, if I dump a Plutus and then I res a Plutus, I have to know that my Plutus can just die. Related to the above, I don't really get why this is 2 influence. This seems like it should be an option alongside Pinhole. Pinhole's 1. Yeah, this doesn't cost money, but I don't really understand the choice on that one. The score that I gave it, being a 3, is higher due to the synergies with Sabo and Trash. There's a lot of cases where you can basically force stuff into the discard and then sabotage them, in the non-mechanic sense. And then, yeah, I noted that this just beats Egg to death. The discard archetype in particular is really going to struggle against a deck running Charm Offensive. The question is, are you slotting Charm Offensive at all? And I think that that's going to be really ID dependent. Scrounge! 5 William Yoricks out of 5. Holy crap. This is the most accessible program Recursion has ever been in terms of infin cred cost. I don't think that's, like, actually necessarily factually true, but it's been so long since we've had Recursion so easy and so effective that it feels true in my heart. And you get it twice? So, like, you get a thing right away, you get the install, you pay only 1 for the privilege, right? And then you get another program, basically for your second click, that you put on the bottom of your stack. That's awesome. Like, this is an amazing double. Heck yeah. Katorka Breakout is kind of now freed up to do things that aren't breaker recursion, and I like that a lot. Criminal in particular very much values that, but honestly, everybody does. Like, this doesn't just grab breakers, right? Like, this grabs everything that is installable and takes MU. It's really, really neat. And yeah, thanks for holding the staple card this time, Anarch. I appreciate it. Like, getting a 1-inf card is often a bit of a downer because it means that the faction is getting a tool that is meant for everybody that wasn't put in neutral for whatever reason, but this is a very Anarch effect, and it is a very Anarch effect that other people want, and I like that about it. I just think this is a really good design. It's not broken, it's just great. Shred. Shred gets 2 Eric Johnson Live in Texases out of a potential 5 Eric Johnson Live in Texases. It's not bad, but it is way more niche than you think it is. So this is typically going to read, the run doesn't end unless the corp trashes 2 cards. It's basically a reverse anoetic. 2 is going to be the number more often than not. It's really hard to find a deck that is running a Clown Car server, unless they are a Glacier deck, which just got a little bit better thanks to new Jinteki tools and Leo. You are incentivized to stack up a really nasty server in Leo, and Shred will do horrible things to that. It's actually a really good tech card. If your meta ends up leaning Glacier, either like Big Weyland, which I don't think is as much of a thing, or like a weird Atea list, or Leo, yeah, no, heck yeah, you absolutely run Shred. But is it going to be that? I don't think it is. I don't think that's going to be the majority. Again, like, that's what that last bullet is about. Okay, we gotta talk about Bling. It gets a sadness. 1 sadness. This is Topan still doing way too much to get a coupon. It's card draw, but worse, because you get the card, and then you maybe don't get the card. If it's not a good time to get the card, then you don't get the card and it goes in the garbage. If your goal is to trash as much of your deck as possible, that would be fine. But I don't think the current card pool actually has the means to make that good. I don't think max with poor impulse control is real, especially when you have to build your own with things like buffer drive and this. You are now spending 5 credits just to get started, plus all of the other stuff that you're doing along the way. It's neat that you are not paying for basically anything else, because Topan should be paying 2 or less for basically everything that matters, but you're also only doing that once per turn. There's something about this that's just kind of rotten. In my testing and in games that I have played and seen, I have been consistently underwhelmed with this to the point where it's honestly kind of surprising it came out as is. Topan makes me sad. This just makes me disappointed. I would rather play Pantograph than Bling. Legitimately, if and when people put something really neat together with this, I'll be excited to see it. I just can't conceive of it, nor have I seen it done. This is a downer. This card is a downer. I want to move on from it. Gourmand gets 4 Delicatessens out of 5. And they said less obnoxious imp couldn't be done. They did. It's Gourmand. It's great. I love this thing. It's no longer a virus card. It's just a tempo piece that offers a heck of a lot for 0. This pays for an entire trash, as big or as small as that is, and it replaces itself with a draw. That is great. That card draw helps you keep pace in a game that is still pretty darn fast, and it makes it playable in basically any Anarch shell. There are vanishingly few Anarch decks that would look at Gourmand and just say no. Lou's gonna cycle these with Scrounge and bully any sideways corp. And Purging can't save you anymore. Sorry, Flyswatter believers. Gourmand doesn't care. If this was one influence, it would be a 5, and it would also just be horrible. It would be the worst. It'd be the worst meta imaginable. You would not be able to go sideways basically at all. Lou kind of already does that. This just makes it even more intense. I think this card is great. I think it's an incredibly cool design. I'm really glad they went the way they did with it. Hantu! Hantu, I left the score in there. Surprise, it's 3 Sadakos out of a potential 5. I happen to like New Mimic. I think this is pretty neat. So, I did the math. Out of the 29 sentries in the current standard card pool, it can break 10 of them without boosting. That's pretty good. It's incredibly efficient until it suddenly isn't. When it drops down to 2, then you can only break those 10 sentries. Having a cookbook obviously helps, right? Because it lets you jump the heck up. This also just kind of, like, chugs through stuff like Biowalk really well one time, then after that it's a little bit rough. You pair this with Leech, you use that as much as possible. You want to be able to hit 3 on demand. 3 is a really important breakpoint for sentries. It gets you through a drafter, it gets you through a doom scroll, it gets you through a lot of other stuff. Once you start getting into the sentries that are bigger than that, they're pretty uncommon, and they're typically really expensive. That's where you really want to pop your virus counters. The hypothetical Oops All Viruses deck that I'm not entirely convinced exists in the current meta, but like it's not like you're not playing Botulus, is capable of cheating through almost anything that isn't Sanaxamun. Does it actually run Hantu? I think it might run 1, but it is a little dubious as to whether or not you need this. That said, I think this is just a solid alternative to the likes of Mimic. I like that it's cheap on influence, and I like that it can explode a bit. That's a really neat way to redesign the old face mask dealy bobber. Remember, etc., etc. Rising Tide. Rising Tide gets 3 Blondie albums. This is too much squeeze for too little juice, though. So, I'm going to complain about Rising Tide a lot, despite giving it a 3, because it's one of those 3s where, like, I recognize that this is a decent breaker, but it has problems. This feels more Shaper than Anarch to me. I get that it says Heap on it, but there are plenty of Shaper cards that do that. With a full playset in Faction, if you dump 2 of these and play the 3rd one, you have a slightly better Corroder. That is a surprising amount of work, and a surprising amount of luck. If you're doing this with propellers, though, suddenly this is kind of great, because all the propellers that you get rid of just make Rising Tide nastier, and Rising Tide's only 1 MU. You can totally afford to do that. Okay, hold on, that's kind of cool. It's also better with Gamedragon, but everything is. And again, Shaper. We're going to talk about Gamedragon later. I think Gamedragon's pretty rad. Again, though, it's a thing with green cards. I see the Topan Bling synergies here, and I think that that's basically irrelevant. I don't think it helps. I think you get there a little bit faster, but then the downside is you're playing Topan and Bling. At the end of the day, this is still a decent fractor at a low price that breaks at the current typical rates. This has Kurapira numbers. This is good. It's pretty good. I just think that all the other stuff that it does with the heap thing is to kind of irrelevant. Pretty often, you're going to play this because it's a one-cost, basic-ass fractor that does exactly what it needs to do. And that's fine. Cacophony. 4 loud Kirby's out of 5. This is a lot of Sabo. Like, a lot of Sabo. And you can't turn it off unless you find a way to trash a resource. The action phase window letting corps react is the only thing that keeps this reasonable. I think this is super powerful, but the way this works is it's only when your action phase ends, so there's basically no way to capitalize on the 3 Sabo that you just did. But that said, it's still 3 Sabo that recurs every time you trash 2 things. That's a lot. That is realistically doable in a, like, once per turn situation against a sideways deck, and that is frightening. It's nice to see Sabo that isn't just for Essa. I think Sabo is a really cool runner keyword that has been kind of stuck in one archetype for a while. This feels like that breaking containment. This is Lu support, not how I'd have thought. And honestly, I like this better than whatever I kind of had in my head of like, well, Lu is like the virus guy. No, Lu is not the virus guy. Lu just wants to ruin your stuff. And Cacophony rewards Lu for doing that. And that's awesome. In certain matchups, this is a win condition. In other matchups, it's just good. And I think that that is a really great place for a card like Cacophony to be. So, heck yeah, we love this thing. Rent Rioters. 3 Jimmy McMillans out of 5. This is day job, but it makes you 1 less credit. Being 1 less credit isn't actually that big of a deal. It's fine. Money on the whole is rarer than it used to be. You are making less money, you are spending less money. Things have gone down, there has been deflation. We're going to talk more about that later, but that's going to be a kind of common refrain that we hit a few times. I like this perfectly fine as is. It's going to lose all the benefits of being an event, so you can't, like, cheat it out with some of the stuff that you would have done prior. But it gains all the benefits of being a resource and a connection. CD is irrelevant right now, nothing really cares about it. And that means it's arguably better. I think that there's an argument to be made that this is more effective than Day Job would have been if Day Job were reprinted. Also, the fact that it's 1-inf means this can just exist anywhere, which means you can take 7 credits for your turn in any faction all the time. That's just a thing that you have to be aware of that exists. Runners can pop up in Econ real frickin' quick. This is good. This is really good. It's not like prepaid Lucky Find levels of Explode, where you could do that and then run. But I still think this is awesome. I like Rent Rioters a whole lot. It's getting a 3 because it doesn't do anything that's absolutely bonkers. It's just solid. This is a really nice card. I think that it fills the kind of niche that a card like Lib Accounts did in a way that is a little bit more interesting. Oh, we're talking about Criminal. Hold on, I gotta sip my water. Okay. Barry gets 3 Knifey Spoonies out of 5. Why you gotta make the cannon Aussie the boomerang chucker, huh, NSG? That's a little weird. It's a little messed up, but he do be chucking those ranks, though. He's really good at it. He's really, really good at it. The hardest part for Baz is staying ahead on money, because that is harder than it's ever been. And one thing that you're going to note about the cards they introduced for Baz in particular is that none of them help him with this. It is surprisingly hard to stay in budget and keep yourself above water. Baz is like the brokest criminal we've seen in a while, but what he does is really cool. It's not what Steve or Los did exactly, but it is their playstyle. Slightly more Los than Steve, in the sense that he just wants to mess with you a lot. He wants to mess with your ice, he wants to res and de-res stuff, he wants to throw pieces out you didn't expect, and he basically just wants to hammer HQ. It's a really fun playstyle. I've cooked up some really weird Baz stuff. I was playing with one of my locals recently, and he ended up in a basically similar spot where it's breakerless or near breakerless, except we went totally different ways about it, and I think that's awesome. I love the ways that Baz creates pressure and saves clicks. It's really neat. And it's also really cool that he does all of that without encroaching on Az's niche of just being efficient, which has gotten so much better. Because, not Baz, see, Baz, Az, maybe I'll just call him Barry, even though it's 2 syllables. Sorry, dude. Az is way better now, in the sense that Az has a lot bigger range of targets. That doesn't mean that Az is going to be great, but what it does mean is Az can do that, can play that kind of setup-focused crim, and then Baz is going to play a much more aggressive one that gets to do his setup for free at the cost of actually paying for it. I think that's cool. I don't think that he's going to be a massive change in terms of, like, the card pool or who sees play into what, but I do think you're going to see him, and I think when you see him, he's going to make a mark. I get to talk about MuslihaT, and I am so excited. 4 HubSpots out of 5 for our marketer here. This is a criminal ID with draw on it. Can we just, like, take that in for a second? That is wild to see. This is not a thing I ever thought we would get the way we're getting it. Like, not since Geist have I seen an ID and just been like, ooh, that does a thing I really care about. It's not the same as Geist. We didn't get an entire suite around it, but, like, that's arguably better. So, MuslihaT is odd in that she takes 5 turns to be as efficient as Xayah in terms of, like, hey, I now have 40 card... I have a 40 card deck, essentially. I've shrunk my deck size. You don't get the Xayah money, which is a bit rough. But the value that she generates from that point on is intense. And it is worth noting that everything you've done up until that point has been accelerated and been effectively saving you clicks more often than not, assuming you took your deck building into consideration when you picked the ID. It is wild how much a free draw matters. Remember Hoshiko? This is like a fairer Hoshiko. It's really good. Her deck building is Tenmacore. I love Ken. I make mention of Ken more than almost anybody that you'll hear who's, like, actively playing Netrunner, and this is, like, go even harder into that, actually. You're incentivized to do it, but more. Even more. Go even harder. With the rotation of so many multi-access run events, she does feel a little restricted in win cons. It feels like you're basically stuck in, like, Twinning or maybe Kushik, which I love. I think that card is way underrated. But aside from that, your options are like, what, Wake Implant? And that's playable, don't get me wrong. You can see a lot of cards with that. But it is hard to apply enough pressure to make that work. And Twinning is just kind of better in basically every way that matters. You still have a lot of options, though. Like, Jailbreak is an automatic 3 of in every list that I've cooked up so far, and I've never been upset to draw it. Like, there's a lot you can do with her still. It just feels like her knockout punches are kind of predictable. It's super cool that she makes Debbie playable. It's awesome that that card is actually useful. It's less cool that her new breaker doesn't like it, but you can fix that by not playing the new breaker. We will get to that when we get to that. One super cool thing about Debbie in MuslihaT in particular is that it's basically a reusable build-your-own Miss Bones, BYOB, if you will, and I think that that's really nice. She also, kind of like Baz, has to work pretty hard to not be poor. Criminals want to run a lot. Running can cost money. If running costs money, it's a lot harder to do the thing. That said, you can compensate for that in your deck building, and there are so many ways to make money with her that aren't even named Sure Gamble. The most well-performing list I've had for her so far doesn't even run them, and it's been great. This is my favorite runner idea of the set. I love Criminal. I love running. I want to run. And MuslihaT says, run, child. Go. And I just, oh man, this idea is awesome. I'm going to be playing her for the foreseeable future. More than anybody else. Like, I love playing all sorts of stuff, and I will branch out and try things, but MuslihaT is going to be my home, I think. I love playing with her, to the point where playing other IDs and not getting the free draw has felt like I am playing worse. Like, it's less fun. Man, just, what an ID. What a design. I love her to pieces. Clean Getaway. 5 dirty laundries out of 5. I'm not going to read that joke out loud. It's terrible. So much better from a rules perspective. I love that getting paid up front makes it so that it's like impossible to give yourself a game loss with this card. Like, that's not a thing that really happened much. It was an easy mistake to fix, but that was a problem, you know? And now we don't have that problem. Now you just get the money. And that also means that you can get the money and immediately spend it. So if you hit a thing that needs to trash, congrats, you have the money to do it. That's awesome. I love that. This gets so much more efficient with discounts, it's ridiculous. If you have like a stacked up Mystic Mamie, or you have, you know, a Ghost Tongue, or you have anything else that subsidizes your events in some kind of way, Clean Getaway gives you more room to abuse that than Dirty Laundry did. This thing can potentially make you a pile of cash, and do it really, really easily. 2 Inf is a consideration. It means that other factions have to weigh their options, but they might still run it. They're going to run it over Bravado, that's for sure. Bravado being 3 influence is rough, and I've still seen people splash that in certain lists. Clean Getaways too, and it's really good. Also, there's a red jacket, so Ken is kind of still vibing. Like, I don't know who is in the helmet. The whole point is that we don't know who is in the helmet, but let me tell you, they look rad as hell. I love this card. Everything about this card is great. I am so glad that this ended up going into Criminal, because it fits Criminal like a glove. And yet it is still a consideration outside of it. I think this is just, like, mwah, like, great design. Seriously awesome. Lie Low. I'm giving this 4 jars of greed. 4 cards, 4 points. That's math. Criminal does not care if the double-click draw is awkward, as long as they can in fact draw. I would argue that because Criminal often runs more duplicates than a lot of other factions, they are more okay with potentially overdrawing and pitching a card. That's fine. $1 for 4 cards is a great trade. Both new Crims are very capable of making use of those additional cards without wasting them, though. MuslihaT is pretty often on Swift, in my experience, although really she can run pretty much anything. And Baz gets to do his install shenanigans. Everybody else can make pretty good use, too. You know, Sable clicks like crazy. Zaya doesn't really care if she wastes a little bit of duplicate stuff, as long as she gets through her deck. And Az has ways of installing things mid-run, that's totally fine. The only character I really worry about is Mercury, but Mercury has bigger problems than having trouble playing Lie Low. Also, the tag removal might be a little bit better than you think it is. It's situational, for sure. There are matchups where it's irrelevant, but in the matchups where it is relevant, it can be a huge boon to your finances. 3 credits matters a lot more than it used to, and this gets you out of that, which is pretty great. Maintenance access. 3 sneak doors out of 5. This is an on-demand sneak door. That is cool. I like that this kind of replicates the surprise factor of install sneak door, click sneak door, and I like that it does it for 0, which is a big boost in a card pool that is, on the whole, less moneyed. But how much were you playing sneak door, really? I was running it in Deep Dive Sable because that card does nasty things in Deep Dive Sable, but were you playing sneak door? Probably not. However, most criminals do have an incentive to touch HQ, and will pay a click to do so. They don't just want to touch HQ to touch HQ, they want to touch it to get money, or activate a proc, or cash out a cupulation, or. HQ is still the Crim server. It's the server they want to hit. This gives them a way to do that. It is worth a click most of the time. However, it's still kind of hard to find slots for, and very much a meta call. If you think you can just run HQ, you'll just run HQ. Maintenance access is for metas in which that is hard, for whatever reason. That said, Absolutely, this sees play in Deep Dive Sable, because Sable has the click to afford still getting the big deep dive. And if you're running Detente, which we'll get to, you're gonna want to slot this. This is a really important pressure tool to keep your thing going. It's also really funny with Panweave. Also, get wrecked, Nebula. This I still am not really high on Nebula. People have been playing a lot of Nebula, and I've been seeing them lose a lot. And I think that this is just kind of like insult to injury on that front. They're stacking up agendas in their hand, they're suffering, they finally flip the ID, and then you just immediately maintenance access, sweep the hand. Bye! Oh, buddy, this deserves a sip of water. I am so excited. 5 siphons out of 5. Look, it's a little baby siphon. It's so cute. Look at it. Oh, that's so nice. This might be the most meta-shifting event in the set. This has brought us back to the point where every time you see Crim, you ice HQ, but it is arguably scarier than Diversion of Funds, or whatever the heck it is, Doof, ever was. This is a 9 cred swing versus Doof's 10, but it is a single click plus a tag instead of a double. I like that better. I think that that is a more interesting space to be in, and it's more interactive for the corp. It gives also, like, the best example of Netrunner's cred deflation, and it changed the math in terms of where that credit split is, right? So it's a 9 credit swing, but it's 3 for the corp and 6 for the runner. That is not a headlock. It helps a headlock deck. If you really want to slime HQ a lot, obviously you're going to run 3 of these. You'll probably try to recur them. But it's worth noting, the credit differential there is no longer like Doof, where it was 50-50. It works like Siphon, where it's twice as good for the runner, but 3 is not a brutal number to lose. It's totally recoverable. And 6 for the runner is great because money goes further now. I think this thing is designed incredibly well. It's so neat to me. There's also sufficient incentive and power within the runner card pool itself to not go tag me. There's a lot of good resources out there you'd rather not lose, but you might. Like, you might do it. And it's awesome that this still works for Seb. It is for influence, and that is a lot, and that is harder than Hot Pursuit, but I don't know if Seb minds when this is as good of a card as it is. And also, Seb can do almost everything he needs to do in faction anyway, so I appreciate that this still exists. I've messed around with this a bit in Seb, and I've loved it. I thought it's been great. And in Criminal, obviously fantastic. This is a thing that I was worried we might not see, and instead, we are seeing one of the best takes on a Siphon type effect that the game has ever seen. It's not that it kills Corpse dead, though. It's just phenomenally well designed. I love Transfer of Wealth. This is, like, one of the best cards in the set in every regard for me. Top marks. Detente, not so much. This gets 2 lucky cigarette cases out of a potential 5. It's an incredibly awkward console to play, explain, and review, but in summary, I think it's more interesting than good. Alright, and I'm going to explain. So, Detente sees you hit HQ, host a card, then access, which means if you see an agenda, it is now off limits, which is a bit of a downer. Either side clicking is kind of a legitimately interesting thing to be able to do. I like that it works that way, but you basically always want the corp to do it because you want them to essentially give you a click on their turn. Now granted, that means they get to control the timing and the terms, but unless their hand is empty, you're probably not actually hitting anything great with this unless you also have, like, a Docklands or something like that. And actually, excuse me, that doesn't even work because it's access 1 card. So it doesn't help. Like, you would think it would, right? But it doesn't. You access 1 card at random. That is what it does. It lets you see one thing. The payoff for Detente isn't the access. The payoff for Detente is ransomware. It's holding the cards hostage at all. The corp is incentivized to click before they take too many cards because they only get 2. So when this thing is holding more than 2 cards, you don't get them all back. You get 2 back. That's important. I've had games where, like, oh, this hosts more. Okay, well, I have to pick now. That's tricky. But, like, most runners don't care about this. And that's the thing that gives it, like, a kind of a negative edge for me. This doesn't actually really help your game plan in a meaningful way. This exists for Headlock in the sense that it is making HQ suck more and more and more, but it makes it suck in a really weird way. And it only hurts certain archetypes of corp all that much. Most runners really don't care about this. This is not like a broadly usable console. This is specifically for the one playstyle that Baz seems to really want to go for. But I'm not even convinced you want to run this over Hermes if you're doing that. I think you want to apply pressure with something like Hermes and win the game faster, more than you want to stretch the game out with Detente. The single most impactful thing that Detente is capable of doing is just putting a card in jail. You can take a card that matters, like if you see an end of the line or something, you can just take it, and you kind of just do the cupulation thing. You're like, I might spend this, but you're not going to know when. And that's really nice. That is not console good. That is not worth your console slot. I think Baz should be running Hermes more often than anything else, and Detente, unfortunately, just doesn't get there. I think it's cool. I think we should experiment with it, and I think that it does apply pressure in neat, creative ways. I just don't think it's very competitively good. Maglectric Rapid. 748 mod is so awkward. What I don't get it. So I went with the only 748 I know, which is 3 Ducatis out of a potential 5. This is a neat take on E-Shutdown. So it is a called shot for everyone who isn't named Baz, because you have to install it. But it's also free in Az, so like that's kind of cool too. This is a neat little thing to install. I think that that's a neat dichotomy there. You can either have it for free, kind of like E-Shutdown, but it takes a click, or you can basically do E-Shutdown for $1 in Baz, specifically. I think that's cool. That's a neat thing to be able to do. Note that this is any card, right? This isn't just ice, so you can do some really funny things with this. You can turn off a Plutus and force them to discard cards again. You can flip an active expensive thing over if they paid a bunch of money for a particular asset or something. You can do weird stuff that forces them to like mess with their board more, and that's why the flavor text on this is really odd. Like, this is just a funky card. And also, yeah, now is like the most authentic Aussie phrase they could have picked that wasn't like Aussie, 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 oi, 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 that they wouldn't have had to censor. I think y'all know. Sun Kancil. 2 creepy deer out of a potential 5. That break discount is better than you'd think when you first read it, or at least it was for me, but it's worse than you'd hope. Of the 22 available code gates, yeah, we're doing math again, it can only break 6 without boosting, and only 3 of those are, like, actual good cards. That's not good. That's, like, really, really rough. I don't think you're going to want to play this much. The run events are typically going to be played early and often. You want to apply pressure while it's easy and cheap to do so. This has anti-synergy with that. On a fundamental level, this wants you to rig up and then play run events, and that is weird. That's really weird. It doesn't work that well. If this cost less upfront, If this cost less upfront, I'd be kinder to it. If this cost 1 to slap down, I would actually be super down. It would compete with Shibboleth, and Lord knows, I don't want to play Shibboleth. I'm very tired of playing Shibboleth, but they keep printing decoders that are worse than Shibboleth. It's also unfair that the deer doesn't like MuslihaT's girlfriend, but I would rather have Debbie in the deck than Cancil. That's not to say that Debbie is like top tier, it's to say that Cancil just kind of isn't all that great. Fransofia Ward also gets a 2. It's 2 Xanadus out of 5. Did we really need new Xanadu? I don't think we did. This is objectively better than Xanadu because it has more stuff on it, but that additional effect is comically situational. How the hell did they settle on the number 15? I just want to know. I would love to talk to somebody on the design team who worked on Fransofia. I'm like, alright, so how many number tweaks did this take for you to land on 15? Because that is a silly, silly number of credits. Again, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, if they're glaciering up or like they're playing Zwicky in any kind of way, I get it. And I like that it specifically kind of calls out what bypass is like, no, it really does bypass everything. But I don't know. That seems rough. And also, cashing out a 3-cost resource just to get a bypass, that's not great. Baz doesn't need this to apply pressure. He really doesn't. Especially because he'd have to install it early, and he already kind of struggles with money. Credit deflation does make the Xanadu tax matter more, but that cuts both ways, because 3 is expensive and slots are hard. Like, yes, there are ways to get this out on the cheap, and you might use them, but I really struggle to say Fransofia is like an important part of the pressure headlock archetype. Frankly, it's just really weird to see what was previously a very Reina-coded card come over, and that's actually kind of what I wanted to end this on. Even though I don't think this card is great, I think it's really interesting that they painted Xanadu blue. I think that that indicates a particular design intent for the set and possibly for Criminal going forward, that denial and headlock and that kind of pressure is a criminal trait. And I think that's really neat, because like Sabo is anarch, right? But this particular type of econ pressure is for Criminal, and ice shenanigans is for Criminal in that particular regard. And I think that's cool. I just don't think it was done too well here. Open market. 4 smokes out of a potential 5. We've got a combination of Daily Cast, which is so great that they banned it, and Career Fair, which was and that has combined into a really good card. Really good card. You're not really going to play this for the Drip Econ. The Drip Econ is nice for the turns where you can't use open market more proactively. It's just nice that the money can come off. Like, that's really good. It's also a deferred sure gamble that you can accelerate. You can just, like, slam out a free class act, which you will do, and you will play those cards together, and you will immediately get value out of that. Plus, you get $2 later, which is just kind of great. Being able to play this in so many different ways and so many different applications just makes it solid. There is not a whole heck of a lot to say about open market. It's just really nice. It's another card that might see play outside, especially if you're using it to install a bunch of resources. I love this thing. I think this is a great card. It's also a job, so Az gets even more value out of it, and I'm not going to stop beating that drum because I want Az to be real. We are in Shaper. This is where I start to struggle a little bit because I am not a Shaper gamer, but I know enough to be dangerous, and I have Shapers in my meta that have given me some of their thoughts on things too, and I've kind of like put everything together. That said, this might be the hardest card to talk about. This is Dewi. I'm giving Dewi 3 puppets out of 5. This card has done irreparable harm to said Shaper friends' brains. It is honestly wild to me what this card has done to people in terms of just like, oh no, my deck building, and they just do the brain expansion meme and they never recover. This is a more aggressive, run-focused kind of Shaper than you might initially think, right? It's like, yes, it says when you make a successful run on both sides, but then you see the MU thing and you think, okay, I'm playing Net Installer. You are, but you're also running all the time. You should probably be trying to run at least once per turn, possibly more. I have seen people pop off with this. I have popped off with this. There is some really neat stuff you can do here, because money and cards are good. There's this ID called Hoshiko. Here's the thing, though. Dewi doesn't have an unconditional cool thing that's just based on running at all. This can struggle to get off the ground. This can also struggle to apply pressure reactively because sometimes your deck will constrain you in such a way that you can't actually do the thing you need to do. And that is a downer in an ID that is otherwise really, really neat. I don't doubt that she works across a lot of matchups. I think that she's pretty dang cool, but I also think that she's going to crash out too often to be a top tier. If people crack Dewi, I'm happy to be wrong, but I think the other ID in this is more easily pushed to the edge of their potential. Dewi's good. I like her. I think she's really neat. I think from a design perspective, super rad. I just don't think her power level is so maxed out purely because she is inherently volatile and draw dependent. Mag, though. This is a 5 drafting tables out of 5 situation that we are in right now. 5 clicks, 5 points. It's just math. This is a 5-click runner. This is a 5-click runner that has a more reliable triggering condition than Lat does, and that install is arguably higher impact in everything that is not a kill matchup. Lat's ability to dodge kill thresholds is really good. Mag doesn't do that, but Mag is better most of the time. Shaper has been made slightly worse at draw, and you will see how that works as we go. But Shaper still has tons of draw, and being able to leverage that and then get that extra install, ooh, that's good. Oh, that's really good. It supports fewer, better runs than Dewi. This is a more kind of traditional Shaper. They want to install stuff and run. That's Shaper. That's what Shaper does. But Mag does it a bit better, and that bit matters immensely. She gets even more value out of bonus clicks, which Shapers are already good at. Like, leveraging that is easy. You know, you throw a Peach Chow out there or something like that. They hit that, they get the click, they do all this other stuff, they get to draw even more, they get to offload, and then they get to install. I love that. The way that Mag plays is like really straightforward. It's just a good shaper, but it's really good. The only potential downside is that you don't do the surprise install before a run if the corp like wasn't sure what you were up to. But Mag accelerates so much that I don't think you care. It also, I mentioned that it makes better, this ID makes better use of the more awkward draw suite than anyone else. She's just great. Like, she's just phenomenal. Shaper got done a little bit dirty in this set and in this ban list. But Mag and Madani, which we will get to, are sufficiently strong to offset it. I think she's awesome. I think it's a genuinely fantastic ID that just does really, really, really cool stuff. This is Illumination. This is not so cool. This gets 2 cars with way too bright high beams behind you at night out of 5. R&D is the server I would not want this to say. This is the worst server for this role. This is going to run into the Joyride problem, but unlike Joyride, it's even harder to line up and make use of. Like, Joyride, at the very least, you get the big payoff and then you can do things with it. This is seeing you make the most difficult run for most shapers to make, and then installing things? What am I mass installing if I'm already sufficiently rigged to run R&D as shaper? R&D, the central that they are going to protect against a green ID every single time. Madani in the same set, which again, we will get to Madani, invalidates this card, because that card solves your install problems, and Illumination doesn't. Dewi didn't even need this. Dewi's great without it. You don't need to play this. You might include it as like a neat thing to do, but I really don't think you need it. I think you're perfectly fine as is. That little bit of discount, a maximum of 3, isn't even that big of a deal when you have to pay for everything anyway. It also just gets significantly worse as the game goes on. Like, you only want to see this early, but you only want to rig up enough to get that early R&D run when they have, like, 1 piece of ice, get in, do the thing, get out. Do you really even want to ever play this more than once? I don't think you do. It's a fun jank enabler. There's cool stuff you can do with it, but I just don't think it's good. I think most decks are not going to run Illumination. I don't think that there is a, like, mass install impetus for that. Like, I just don't really understand what this card is supposed to be doing that you would include more than maybe a 1 of it. Ritual. 4 caffeines out of 5. Oh, you quit energy drinks, huh? Good for you. So this is our Diesel replacement, and it's just as good as Diesel turn 1, which is the most common use case for Diesel. Click 1 Diesel is burned into the brains of everyone who's ever played Netrunner. But it is significantly worse at recovery. If you're trying to wrap your turn and draw towards the end for options or to get out of a kill threshold, this can't do that for you. And that is a really interesting problem to have to solve. I like that, actually. I think that's a really interesting way to make Diesel, or New Diesel, not the draw card that everything else has to live up to and then fail to live up to. Click Shenanigans enable some kind of edge casey neat things. I know some people have been messing with Synth Gland a bit. I think bonus clicks in general create a really neat thing for this where it can just power draw better than anything. That's really neat. I don't know how much it's going to matter necessarily, but again, when we talk about Madani, you'll see that, like, hey, drawing a bunch of cards is real good, and also, like, with Mag, it's really good, even if you don't have Madani installed yet. You can still overdraw and then do things and then install a card, and that is just, yes, we love that. Even if this was a straight nerf and only usable click 1, right? If they took away the clicks remaining thing, it would still see play. You would still play a slightly worse Diesel, and I don't mean Blueberry. I mean just, it's Diesel, but it's restricted in some kind of way, kind of like a reverse creative commission. You'd still play that, and you will play this. This is a fine card. It's very good. It's still making Shaper the best at drawing cards, because they want to draw more cards, because they want to install more cards, and Shaper is being laser targeted on that with Mag and some of the other stuff we've got coming. I also just really love the flavor of this. I love that, like, yeah, sitting down, you know, in your comfy pajamas. I love that Mag's just hanging out in their pajamas. That's super fun. And, you know, starting their day with tea is great. And that's why it's only good top of turn, because if you stop for a tea break in the middle of the day, is it as satisfying? No, it's not. Yeah, solid. Good card. I was worried about how they were going to do Diesel, and I actually think this came out really nice. Gamedragon Pro. So I'm going to give this 3 hideous graphics cards out of 5, but I want you to understand that that is because this is the role player, very specific purpose kind of 3, okay? This is a balanced Turbine. This does what Turbine does, but it does it in a more fair way. I almost feel like that's why they put it in the just take this goofy looking chip away from us box in the art, because it's like, compared to Turbine, I don't know, but Turbine's not here. This is, I explained, this is the role player kind of 3. It's plenty playable. I actually really like this to the point where I've splashed it in my other decks, because I think it's that good. But it is hard to exploit. It's arguably better out of faction, which is kind of strange. Shaper's pretty good at breaking a lot of things. Pretty much whatever they want, they can find a way to do it. And 2 Influence makes importing it into other things really, really easy. I have been playing this in Criminal and having a blast. It's really effective. It saves you money. What can I say? If they ever stack types, they're embarrassed to do so. In many cases, you put this on a Fractor or a Decoder and you are golden. It's really, really good. It's also, like, secretly Tau stocks, right? Like, Tau gets to rearrange and stack ice. The whole thing with Tau is making a server, be it the remote or R&D, totally awful for the corp. And Gamedragon just says, hey, you want to turn any given breaker into a pressure spike? You want to just roll them? And Tau can roll them. I haven't figured out the Tau deck yet, but Tau is one of my favorite shapers because I love the kinds of aggressive that Tau enables, and Gamedragon just makes that better. I really think this thing might be good. I think Tau might see a bit more play than he's been, especially if Lock the Remote becomes a win condition. Also, I didn't put this in the slides, but I just realized this is another thing that just kicks Nebula right in the teeth. Like, Tau's gonna do horrible things. Alright, we gotta talk about Madani. And I need a sip of water to talk about Madani. 5 professors out of 5. In a shocking twist, the winner of the most shapery card of the set award is actually good. This is the most shaper I have seen a shaper card be in a long time. Madani is bananas click compression. It is a wild amount of value for a console to offer. This thing costs 2, and it gives you no MU, which is arguably a plus for Dewi. But it lets you host as many programs as you want for a click, and then install one of them on each player's turn forever. Forever. And if you slap down DZMZs with this, you have your MU figured out, and those programs are now costing you nothing. They're cheap and or free. Madani is sick. This card is awesome. There are so many combos with this that I'm not even going to talk about what all they actually are. If you can dream it, you can do it. Madani is the program enjoyer's choice. This thing rocks. Even if you don't do anything clever with it at all, if you are playing a reg list with Madani, it is still better than almost any other shaper console in basically any given situation. You're not going to run Anacam over this most of the time because you have plenty of ways to draw and they got rid of Creative Commission. LilyPad is punching air right now because you don't need what LilyPad is doing nearly as much as you just need to haul through your stuff, and Madani does that for you. Every other shaper console does not see play. Madani rules. I am a little sad that it is constricting shaper console space in that way, in that this is going to be like the tier 1 pick for a shaper console for a while, but at least it's awesome. Like, it's great. I think you might actually see some retribution slots for this, because I think a lot of shapers are going to get complacent. I think that Dewi players in particular are going to start doing their stuff and their runs and do their installs and set up a giant clown car Madani, which will then get them public trailed and retributed, and all of their stuff goes in the garbage. I don't think that's going to be a very common play, but don't be surprised if retribution starts showing up a little bit if shaper with Madani becomes a problem. Because there are answers to hardware that exist and basically don't see any play, but they might start needing to, because this console is wicked good. Azimat. I'm giving this 4 talismans out of a potential 5, which, by the way, if you have not seen... I don't want you to watch the movie Talisman. You don't have to watch a David Dakota film, but you have to watch the trailer. Oh my god, it is the best use of a minute and a half you're going to have today. Anyway, this is Principia 2 Dewi Compatible Edition. It is 2 MU. That is a lot, but it is also arguably more important than Principia was in its card pool now. So there's a lot of things that need to be trashed, and a lot of them cost 2 or 3, if not less. And Azimat does that for you, which is really, really important. And it makes sense why they would charge you more MU for this, because in a card pool where money is tighter, Azimat's 2 reusable credits for trashing are super valuable. You will get a ton of use out of this. It's also immediately credit positive, which is a really interesting choice. They put this at a 1, they gave you 2, and it's 2 that, depending on the matchup, you might be able to use every single turn. I think that's really interesting. Shapers are obviously the best position to use this because MU is kind of a tricky thing, but anyone can if their rig is either 3 breakers in this or isn't really reliant on breakers at all, hint hint anarch. This is a kind of staple that compares to Chesva. I do think Chesva is a better card. There are ways to use Chesva in really creative methods, and Chesva provides a lot of reusable econ in really important ways, and really broadly applicable ways that Azimat doesn't, because this just does trash costs. That said, it's not restricted, it's just trash costs. Anything you're paying to trash goes up. Expect to see this splashed in lieu also. I don't think I made a bullet for this, because it's 1 whole influence. So that means that they are considering this an important card to splash. And they're right, because a lot of things need trashing now, and Azimat is a great way to do that. You just need to plan around that MU, and as long as you plan around that MU, you're golden. Yeah, it rocks. This thing's awesome. Chromatophores. 3 umbrellas out of 5. Hello, better egret. Are we umbrella gaming? Wait a minute. That's really exciting. I don't actually necessarily think we're umbrella gaming. I think umbrella is a really rough card. But this is a better egret. You know, it's 1 cheaper, and other than that, it's basically egret. I think painting ice is legitimately useful in a card pool where breaking ice can ruin your budget. It is a lot harder to break a lot of ice these days. Chromatophores solves that problem for you. It also might be the way in which we keep playing things like Lobby and Orca. The problem is, it doesn't really play nice with Spark, so maybe that's a bit of an undercooked idea. But I do think that Chromatophores enable some cool stuff. I wanted a paint effect to still make it in, and I'm really glad that this is what we got. I think this is just a nice riff on Egret that's just a little bit better. Also, Ari enjoyers just stood up and cheered. New Trojan, cheap Trojan. $1 is important, for reasons we'll get to. And this does things that Ari wants. It's especially nice because it means that it then combos even better when you're spreeing. And you can ride people with you can ride people with things like Fazarum and things like that. It's really, really nice. It does create a bit of a problem in the sense that it doesn't, Fazarum doesn't work on barriers. I don't actually 100% know the text on that. I'm gonna have to check that. I'm not gonna edit this out. I legitimately need to look that up. But I think there's a lot of cool stuff that Ari can do with this regardless. It's also just a good UAV Trojan. And also, seriously, I am going to be testing Umbrella even harder. I enjoy playing really aggressive Ari lists in Shaper. If I'm going to play Shaper, that's one of the things I prefer to do. And if I can make Umbrella work with, like, Spree and other stuff like that, I am super, super excited. Just a really, really interesting card that I keep wanting to work and it keeps not working, but Chromatophores helps, and stuff like UAV is compelling. Devadatta Drone. I'm giving this 3 B cages out of 5. It's basically just kind of a worse Nyashia in the sense that you don't get as many counters, but there are some neat things you can do with this. It's still a temporary R&D interface for a whole 1 cred, and it's in the same set as the other cards in this Shaper chunk for a reason. I think that this card plays really nice with the new stuff that we've got. Low cost, 1 MU, you can get rid of it eventually, sell it to Knickknack, we'll get to that in a second. Use it as part of like an overinstall to, be like, all right, I'm going to hit R&D in a bit. It's good. It's just solid. It's not great, but it is decent if only because NSG doesn't print a lot of multi-access, especially for R&D. It is really hard to deep dig like you used to. Devadatta Drone doesn't fix that, but multi-access is just important to speed games up, and you need that. To at least to some extent in most decks, and Devadatta does do that for you. That said, there are other cards you'd probably rather charge than this, and you might find that this is something that you want to play with Pretty Mary. I think her stock has gone up a bit. I've always rather liked Pretty Mary, and then it seems like the broader meta kind of didn't agree with me, but I never found that card to be disappointing, and I think it's only better now, as, again, multi-access is a little bit tricky, and Devadatta so naturally synergizes. Plus, Mary doesn't take MU, and that's just nice, and she's a whole $1. You should probably play Pretty Mary. She's pretty good. Principia. Too delicious fruit. out of 5. I don't want to be that guy, but 2 feels like I'm being generous. This is not a good breaker, y'all. I did the math. This breaks 8 out of 22 barriers without boosting, but one of those is logjam, so that doesn't count. It's really 7. And I gotta tell you, that's not very good. Most barriers you're gonna hit are gonna require a boost, and the boost on this is lousy. You are not happy about it. Gamedragon can't really save that either, because 3 is not a particularly notable breakpoint for barriers. You really want to get to like 4, and then you're kind of playing with fire. More than that is obviously great, and you can afford to pay for things from there, but there's kind of not a lot of really good ways to make Principia efficient. This feels like it's here to be a cool knick-knack trick. I get, and we're going to talk about knick-knack, I swear. I just wanted to do these in order, but skip to that if you really need to know what that means. Knick-knack is a really good card, and I like the idea that we have things that are cheating costs so that you can get an upswing in credits with knick-knack, but slots are hard, and I don't want to slot a bad fractor to do that. There's a world in which you can play this with Rising Tide and game that in some kind of way. I just don't really think that that's especially efficient or good or consistent or anything nice. I don't have a lot of nice words for Principia. I like the art. In conclusion, why not Pressure Spike? That's all. I just don't think Principia is worth playing. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Again, if it's good at anything, it'll be for trading up with Knick-Knack, but I'm just not really impressed by it. Here's Knick-Knack. 5 Pawn Stars out of 5. This is a really cool riff on Aesop Econ. I think Aesop Econ did see some play already, and it was arguably underrated even though it was good, and this is arguably better. I love this card. I think it's incredibly cool. Anything that cheats out programs or leaves cards partially spent, you generate value from. That was already true for Aesop. It's even more true now. I think that's really important to note here. Also, you get draw out of this. I didn't specifically call that out, but I just think that that's a really neat additional upside that is a very Shapery change. If Shaper hadn't had their econ reduced so much, I would be tempted to call this busted, but as it stands, I think a lot of Shaper decks are going to lean on a card like Knick-Knack to provide the reliable econ that their other stuff then kind of like gives them boosts for. Losing cards like Trickshot and having to use cards like Overclock to really get over the line was a scary proposition. Knick-Knack eases that a lot. I don't think that it's broken, but I think that's largely because you're going to need it. Also, it's not like you're trading up consistently, right? Like, you're trading for value, so you need to find ways to game it, and that forces you to get creative. That said, that is an incredibly fun puzzle, and I know a lot of Shaper players have been having a lot of fun figuring out ways to get the most value out of Knick-Knack, and I think that's really, really neat. I want to load 3 Orcas and 3 Sparks into a deck and go spear fishing. That's my contribution. I want to pull the biggest thing and then make a giant pile of money. I want to spend 3 and then make 10. That's econ, baby. That's money. I want to do that. Finally, we have Side Hustle. Side Hustle gets 2 door dashes out of a potential 5. This is probably not as good as you might think it is. It's surprisingly rough to play. So you get 1 install and 5 runs before the payout, but that is the bad kind of deferred sure gamble. You do get a draw, but like at the time you finally end up popping this, I don't even know if that really matters. That's 0.66 creds per click. That is worse than clicking for credits, unless your runs are all profitable. And outside of Criminal, they probably aren't. And inside of Criminal, they still probably aren't. This is like a weird deferred subsidize. It's not even a subsidize. You don't get it up front. It just kind of, it's a rebate. And it's not very good at that. If you run this with Penny Shaver, the math gets considerably better. Who's running Penny Shaver? Is it Zaya? Is it MuslihaT? Probably not. And like, do you really want to go for Penny Shaver? Penny Shaver's not bad. It's better than people have been treating it, but like, it's a really dubious include, and if you're doing that to justify running Side Hustle, I feel like you've made an error. It's really only any good with open market where you get full value out of it the entire way and you get all the money, and even that I think is kind of dubious. If you're going to run this, you will probably run open market, and you will probably run this in Criminal, but I really just don't know if Side Hustle is good enough to justify running at all. Okay, this is the part of the video where I make predictions that are going to age poorly. Anarch was forced to carry a lot of the splashable support cards this time around, and is going to see slightly tapering numbers as a result once new cards are kind of known and understood, and the Criminal and Shaper decks start getting built that really do things. The new IDs are not going to stop people from playing everything worth including in Hosh, especially not Topan. Expect more of what you've already seen, just a bit slower due to the bans. Mulch will still exist, it's just very different. Also, Seb is low-key really good right now, unless you're versus Synapse or like anything that really wants to do tag shenanigans, but really just Synapse. Synapse will get a bit too much value out of it. It's a funky matchup. It does really strange things. So yeah, slight taper of numbers, but not in a way that will like really hurt the faction. That said, if we get a Hosh ban, all bets are off. I have no idea what's going to happen if they actually do that. NSG said they were going to do right by Criminal, and they meant every word. MuslihaT is like Red Criminal taken to an extreme, Baz is Headlock Shenanigans, and every ID is improved for these cards existing. But I still think Sable is top dog, followed close behind by MuslihaT and Zaya, because free clicks are the best thing you can get for free. The near prints are dynamite, all of them are good. The new stuff slightly less so, except for Xanadu reprint, that one maybe not so much. But when taken as a whole, this set leaves Criminal in a better place than they've been in years. I am so happy with where this card pool has gone. I have not had this much fun playing Criminal in a while. The only real downside of playing Crim at this point is that because you make less money overall, the skill floor is higher and you need to be smarter with your runs. That is just a skill thing. That is something people will get the hang of. I cannot wait to help people understand Criminal because they haven't bothered playing it until now because it's been at the bottom of the totem pole for so long. It really feels like Criminal is super back. I mean that sincerely, and I am so happy. A lot of folks are going to learn how to play Criminal for the first time, and that excites me greatly. I'm going to siphon you. Keeping in theme with Crim, Shaper got a great value ID and one that's rad but kind of competitively dubious. But their new cards, on the whole, are a little bit more inconsistent, outside of Madani, which is cracked. The main problem is that they lost a lot of their powerful tools in rotation and bans, and suffered from the time-honored tradition of having their cards kicked out due to Anarch. Anarch is powerful, better ban a Shaper card. That'll solve it. And it just kind of kept happening. So now Shaper's in sort of a funky spot where they're very good at playing Net Installer, and they're pretty effective on that point, but they're having trouble with Econ. Ari diehards will find her as good as ever, especially if they can work Knick-Knack in. But beyond that, I think it's going to be Madani lists. Madani is just bananas. Madani is so good. It is honestly wild what that card enables. I am a little afraid that they might look to it for a ban if it stays as dominant as I think it's going to be, but I also don't think it creates much of a negative player experience yet, in the sense that we don't have cards like Clot or Imp or things like that just slamming things out on Madani would be a huge problem for. So I'm not super duper worried on that front. I think it just gives Shaper a really good way to get stuff installed that is mildly risky to the hardware trash. Overall, I think Shaper's okay, but I do think they're at the bottom of the pile right now. But not by a lot. Like, they're plenty playable. They just feel a little bit weaker to me. Also, if nothing changes, I think this is going to be a runner meta. I think that it's going to swing the pendulum a bit, but not to the point where runners are going to crush everybody. I think that corps have a lot of really good tools. I think the fact that runners do not have a non-playstyle answer to stuff like Fast Advance is significant. I think that money being tighter overall means that if corps bait bad runs, they can put runners in a spot where they just don't have enough gas in the tank to win. And that's a very kind of old school kind of Netrunner that feels a lot closer to the Netrunner that I loved the most. So even though this is looking like a runner meta a little bit to me, I don't see that as inherently a negative because it feels like corps still have a lot of really cool outs. It just means that when the runner gets going, it can be hard to stop them. And that's okay, I'm fine with that. Everybody should be able to do really cool stuff. And right now, this set really does feel like it does that. I'm done talking. Stop listening to me and go play some Netrunner. I'm really grateful to the folks that have taken time to listen to my stuff. It seems like there's at least some amount of interest in having more people talk about Netrunner cards. I don't 100% know where that's going to go, if anywhere, but I had fun doing this, and I'm glad that I can put more opinions out there about Elevation. Thanks for watching.